I am not a Star Wars fan. Those words have come out of my mouth more times than I can count. I hear them all the time too. I've had such a meh reaction to the movies I've seen and the other things I've been exposed to related to this franchise that I've never taken the plunge. I'm a fan of sci-fi, but there's something so intimidating about how big this series has become. It's something that I've never bothered to jump into. In other words, I don't really give a shit. I didn't give a shit when the new movies were being released, didn't give a shit about Rogue One or The Mandalorian. Star Wars movies and TV shows just aren't my thing. Video games, on the other hand, now, that's something I can get into. And oh boy, there are a lot of Star Wars games. Ever since 1993, there has been a Star Wars video game release for what looks like every other year since up to now. And these games, of course, flew under my radar. I didn't even exist in 1993. But growing up, I played games like Force Unleashed and Lego Star Wars, which I remember being a good time. In 2019, I heard about a little game by the name of Jedi Fallen Order, a Souls-like Jedi game. This is something I did not see coming, and with the Soulsborne Hero games being some of my favorites, it piqued my interest. They may very well be some of the most influential games created in my generation, and they've left a remarkable imprint on the face of this industry. And as with so many other mediums, when one creator gets it right, the others follow and create more products of a similar type, thus creating a genre. Yes, I did just explain what a genre is. I'm assuming most of you probably already know that. The Souls-like genre has invited everyone to take a swing, with more installments added to it every year. Jedi Fallen Order came and went. I didn't play it for a long time, but I had heard decent things. After hearing of an upcoming sequel, I decided I wanted to play both games back to back. I want to take a look at what Jedi Survivor does right, in comparison to its predecessor. I have a lot of feelings about both of these games now that I've completed them, so I'm going to speak about it into a microphone and post it on the internet. Enjoy.
Finally, he arrives! We had action on how long it would take me to get here.
And who are you?
Who am I? I'm Sort Tormo, baby. I'm the boss of this operation. You have greasy forearms to thank for bringing us together.
I will, as soon as we get out of here.
We have a special challenger for you tonight. An enforcer from a bygone era. A Jedi!
Before we jump into this, let me reiterate. I am no Star Wars fan. I know the basics, meaning I watched Episode 4, some of the prequels, some other shows when I was younger. I get the gist. I understand some broad parts of the lore. I was going into this completely in the dark, though. I didn't know if it was canon. But I didn't care too much at the time. I just wanted to enjoy this combat and the exploration, all the things that come with a Souls-like game. The term Souls-like is thrown around very liberally these days, but the developers have been quoted that they found inspiration in the old-school Dark Souls games, so yes, it is a Souls-like. The main aspects of this game that are Souls-like, quote-unquote, is the combat, the exploration and saving system as well. This game is made up of a few semi-open world planets that are connected by the Holotable, a fast travel system akin to how games like Demon Souls are set up. These maps are dotted with save points or meditation spots that you can use to rest or level up. But unfortunately not fast travel? We'll get to that later. It's annoying. The combat is also very similar to Sekiro in philosophy. Fallen Order makes use of a parry mechanic that has become so famous since that game knocked it out of the park back in 2019. Before we get into the basic game loop, I should talk about the game's visuals. Obviously, it looks really good. In fact, it looks like it could have come out this year. Everything from the skyboxes, the flora on each planet, the colors at play here, the lighting effects are super fun to look at. All of the cutscenes are very well animated and acted, making it feel really authentic. I also didn't run into any glitches that were noticeable during my playthrough on the PS5, which is good. I would hope EA would get it running smoothly by now, but it's EA, so who knows. The basic gameplay loop is exploration and combat. Let's get exploration out of the way first. There is something about the level design in this game that is just leaving a decent amount to be desired. There are the normal variety of collectibles, some cosmetic and others like health or force upgrades. You can also find more healing stims to upgrade your blood vials. Oh shit, no. I mean Estus flasks. Fuck. Nope. Oh yeah, healing stims. That's it. That's right. So average for a game like this. You get it. But wow, the developers really want you to explore this world. I felt that it was forced upon me, constantly. There were a few times in my playthrough where I would get to the end of a huge area and the game would just be like, okay, now you gotta go all the way back to your ship, enjoy, and this is where I think a fast travel system would be a huge benefit. Now granted, sometimes special things would happen on the way back. New enemies would spawn or a cinematic would happen, but in examples like the first world that you visit in the game, I spent way too long trying to get back to the ship, fighting through the same enemies I fought on the way there. It can get annoying, and it would make me want to stop playing at times. This is probably a way for the developers to encourage players to explore unchecked nooks and crannies on the way back, but I feel like I should at least have a choice. And if I think I missed something, I can use that same fast travel system to go back to that place and look for that something. I looked into it, and of course, a fast travel mod was introduced for the PC version. It seems as though I'm not alone. The developers have gone on record saying they wanted to mimic the feel of Metroid Prime. But this game is certainly no Metroid Prime. That game actually makes backtracking fun. This one does not. Not to mention I didn't find the actual act of exploring all that enticing either. You could find the occasional secret mini-boss, which is cool, and Force Echoes are a fun lore mechanic if you're into that, but there were a handful of instances where I would be met with a fork in the road, and I would just want to continue on the main path. The main thing driving me down these alternate pathways were the secret mini-bosses, which I do like, by the way. I would also get lost or confused by the game's muddled-looking map system. I found myself pulling it out all the time and getting really annoyed by how long it takes to open. It's a minor gripe, I guess, but with BD, the little robot companion that you play with, showing you the map, each time you want to look at it, it has to zoom in and it pops up with this blue multi-level digital map that I just really don't like looking at. It's a necessary evil at times, though, because this game does showcase a lot of verticality. You kind of need a 3D map. Cal Kestis is a goddamn acrobat, and he uses his force powers to do things that put Nathan Drake to shame. But much like in Nathan Drake's Uncharted, the climbing does grow a bit tiresome. It can be a little wonky and unclear where to go at times when jumping from a ledge, which you do quite a bit of. Also, sometimes Cal would just completely miss the surfaces I would try to jump to and plummet to his death. There are a lot of moments where I find it fun and cool to look at, but when it comes to parkour mechanics, I feel like if overused, especially in a semi-open world game with a fuck ton of backtracking, it gets stale really quickly. The exploration in this game is not necessarily bad, but I had a really hard time pushing myself to explore to my heart's content because I didn't have enough motivation to do so. You spend most of your time exploring, but you also spend a lot of time in combat. Now the combat is a different story. I've always thought lightsabers were cool, and Fallen Order fully embraces how cool they can really be. Parry-based sword fighting is perfect for a Star Wars game. The combat, although not perfect by any means, is very satisfying and fun to learn. If you're familiar with Souls combat, you'll get the gist very quickly. Dueling enemies with a lightsaber has never felt this good, and is further carried by some very satisfying animations. These animations can be a little janky at times. Enemies can get stuck in walls or on corners, causing some strange glitches, but it's nothing too extraordinary. There are a number of force moves to use here, and you'll find yourself using them a lot in each encounter. Pausing, pushing, pulling enemies. It's cool, and necessary for fighting a lot of mobs. Whenever Cal uses the force, he gets this weird blurry effect that makes him and whatever other enemy he's using it on go all fuzzy. I know this is a way for the player to see a visualization of the force, which is somewhat necessary. I would rather see all the details in the animation. I guess that might just be a personal preference. The blurry shapes are annoying. I am not a fan of the blurry stuff. It's not a big deal at all, but a bigger deal for me are the enemies you're fighting. There is a decent variety here: Imperial droids, stormtroopers, special stormtroopers, purge troopers, fucking salad troopers, a number of different animals and monsters too per each planet, which there are a few planets in this game. I found myself enjoying the human fights much more, which I expected. Parrying a giant spider is pretty cool the first couple times you do it, but I simply do not enjoy fighting them as much as the humanoid enemies, and you find yourself fighting animals a decent chunk of the time. I share this sentiment with a lot of the Souls games too. I feel like the systems just work better with some sweet human-on-human action. Yeah, with human enemies, it's a parry game, where you're having an actual sword fight with fucking lasers. With large monsters, I found myself just relying on dodging more often than parrying, and I don't find this as reliable or interesting because the hitboxes in this game, especially with dodging, can be wacky as hell. There were plenty of times in my playthrough where I was like, I totally should have been hit by that attack, but I wasn't. and vice versa, of course. But overall, the combat is the best part of this game, kind of by far. And I would further that by saying the bosses are the best part of this game. There are a variety of available mini-bosses in this world, and I would love actively seeking them out. Some of them are just reskins of already established mobs, but others, like the famous Ogdo Bogdo, are pretty unique and fun to fight, if not quite difficult. There are also bounty hunters that are dotted throughout the maps looking to kick your ass, and these guys are usually on the weaker side, but it's always fun. I love running into them. Getting ambushed out of nowhere while exploring, which is otherwise somewhat boring in this game, is fun. Pleasant surprise. There were plenty of instances where I was frustrated with spotty hitboxes, but overall I enjoyed fighting these little mini boss boys. The main story fights were also one of the best parts of the experience for me. Fights with the likes of Terran Malicos and the Ninth Sister and Triss. They're great high points in this game, and I'll probably revisit them again at some point. My least favorite, though, once again, are the beast fights. There's this one against this giant bat named Gorgara. If you've played this game, you might know what I'm talking about. This fight can go fuck itself. It shit sucks. I really don't like it. On to the part of this game that I thought I wouldn't find any interest in at all, but ended up pleasantly surprised with: the story. I didn't realize how cinematic and well-produced this would be. Of course, I should have assumed, this being a Star Wars game, cinematic storytelling is kind of the whole deal. All of the performances are believable, and I found myself actually liking characters like Grease and Seer. I can't say I found any of the others too memorable, not to say their backstories and convictions aren't cool. The only ones that I really can say that I like are within the main cast, although I did not like Merrin very much. She was barely even in the game too, coming in right at the end. And also, Cal is fine. I like Cameron Monaghan, and he gives a good performance for Star Wars. His backstory is pretty cool. Some of the sequences in which you play as Padawan Cal are really awesome. Coolest parts of the game, really cinematic and fun to watch.
Through these doors. What's that sound? Get ready.
Move, Padawan. We have to leave now.
Sometimes he seems kind of like the generic good guy, but there is more to him than that. With that, I'm now going to spoil literally everything about this game, so just so you know. The final boss fight with Triss is really cool. It was actually pretty hard. I found myself getting my ass kicked a little bit, and when I finally killed her, I was overall pretty happy with the experience. She basically forced me to use everything that I had learned up to that point, and I appreciate that. After this was over, though, I assumed the game was over. It has some pretty glaring issues, but overall I enjoyed myself, and I was excited to move on to the newest entry. I was about checked out when this shit happens.
That doesn't look good.
It isn't. It's him.
You have failed me, Inquisitor.
Avenge us!
Yeah. Everyone knows who that guy is, of course. This caught me completely off guard. It was a genuinely surprising reveal, and the following section is fucking awesome. I do enjoy cinematic elements in my games, and this is a really intense and cool note to end on. Like, they really milked this scene, and if you get to the point without spoiling yourself, you're in for a genuine surprise. I thought it was sick. It may seem like fan service, but who cares? This is the best kind of fan service. I'm not even connected to this series, and I was soy-facing hard. I really liked it.
Target is blocking my attack.
Jedi Fallen Order is solid, but at times it feels like an unfinished idea. It suffers in a few pretty important areas, and because of this, it kind of misses its potential. When it plays to its strengths, it's a really fun action game with some great cinematic qualities. When it comes up short, it's a glitchy and frustrating experience with a lot of backtracking. As I said before, I did enjoy my time with it, and it made me very excited for what was coming next.
This is for me.
Nice one, BD.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Before I get into this, I just have to say, I think Jedi Survivor is the right way to do a sequel. I'll expand on that later, but this game basically takes Fallen Order's formula and cranks it up to 11. Not only did they expand upon all of the things that Fallen Order did right in a major way, they also fixed a great deal of the problems fans were upset about. A lot of the problems that I also just commented on. So it upsets me that I have to start talking about Jedi Survivor by shitting on it. The way this game released is unacceptable on PC. There are reports of it running very poorly on even high-end gaming PCs, and a large portion of the Star Wars dedicated fan base spent $70 on a meal that was served to them raw. This is a normal development at this point, unfortunately. It needs to stop being normalized, but the industry is heading more and more into this direction, and like everything else in this world, as it continues to grow, it continues to become more corrupt and worse off. EA is a known culprit of selling games that are woefully incomplete, and in this case they simply tarnish the reputation of a game that I would otherwise consider pretty freaking good. Even on the PS5 version, I noticed some weird issues that I could look past if it weren't for the state of its PC port. Basically what I'm trying to say is go fuck yourself, EA. You do not deserve the developers that made this game. Truly. Or any game, honestly. The issues I had on the PS5 version were certainly minor compared to what was going on the PC port, but they were noticeable. The main problem was the frame rate though. I prefer performance mode 9 times out of 10 when I'm playing on console. I think frame rate trumps resolution literally any day. And although this game was set to 60 in performance mode, it was almost always diving down to 30. A lot of times sub 30. The frame dips were strong here, and they happened consistently. I think I experienced them in almost every map and story beat. I say story beat because some of the worst frame dips were happening during cutscenes. Sometimes it seemed like it was going down to 15 frames per second, during more strenuous cinematic events especially. Which I assumed were pre-rendered, but if the frame rate's dropping, then I don't even know. I don't know why that was happening. It probably has been patched since. I would hope so. This is a shame though, because this game is fucking beautiful. Much like Fallen Order, this game is very, very nice to look at, even more so. All of the environments and new planets look amazing, and the character models are super detailed. The colors and lightning effects are also just really good. I found myself consistently impressed with what my eyeballs were absorbing here. So the frame rate being an issue, I know will probably go away with time, is forgivable, of course. The visuals aren't the only thing here that's improved though. In fact, I'd say that Jedi Survivor is an improvement in almost every way. One of the biggest improvements is the exploration. If Fallen Order tried to mimic games like Sekiro or Dark Souls, then Jedi Survivor is adding the new God of War games to the mix. And I like all of the games involved here, so that's a win for me. Planets and maps are now much more expansive and open-ended. The player can spend hours and hours exploring planets like Kobo, with huge, wide-open plains and large sections of the map that are completely optional to comb through. This feels so much more organic and engaging than whatever the hell was going on in the previous game. There are also tons and tons of mini-bosses to stumble upon and challenge, as well as tears. A sort of challenge level that gives you an upgrade after you complete it. You can miss them, but if you find them, they have some of the hardest challenges in this game. It feels much more rewarding to explore now, not only because of the new stuff you can find, but also because traversal is actually kind of fun now. There are mounts in this game. I was not expecting that at all. All they really do is just, make you go faster, but it certainly beats watching Cal's backside as he runs everywhere, because that's what most of the last game was. On top of that, they made the parkour so much better. Like wow. In the beginning of the game, it's basically the same as the first, but you unlock so many cool features. A grapple hook, an aerial dash, a special force field mechanic, just to name a few. There's more later. Parkour is actually just a skill now. You can actually be good at it. There are ways to completely reset your dashes and double jumps in midair, so you can maintain altitude for longer periods of time if you're good enough. Not to say that it's necessarily difficult, but now it's way more engaging. It's actually something that you can fail. There's even a tier dedicated to parkour, which is awesome because, yeah, it's actually enjoyable now. Climbing is also a lot faster and much more responsive. This game is almost like a platformer sometimes, and it's fun. Traversing and exploring is much more rewarding, and there's actual motivation to do so. Now there's also side content. Characters to meet and actual side quests to complete called rumors, which seem like an excuse to point you in the direction of cool stuff, which I'm All for, completely okay with that. There's a bar on Kobo that serves as one of the few hubs for the player, and you can find lost NPCs on this world and tell them to go there. I didn't care too much for this, and I didn't engage with it to the fullest extent, but I can see people enjoying it, and I'm not against its conclusion. It's a lot like the church in Bloodborne, except, less tragic. It's also here that they introduce one of the most important characters in the Star Wars pantheon. A true god among men, who honestly I can't believe I've never heard of until now. Women want him, men want to be him, and his true importance to the story just can't be understated. Of course, I'm talking about Turgle.
Think you can pull a fast one on us?
It was all just a misunderstanding!
I'm not sure if he was added to this game as an original character, but whoever made this guy deserves 3 raises, at least 3 of them. He is just such a great dude. I'm expecting some more Turgle content after this game. Combat has also been overhauled in a few ways, and for the better. Cal can now fully customize his lightsaber into different forms. 5, to be exact. You can choose 2 of them and upgrade each individually, switching in between them whenever you want. I used crossguard and dual wield, and it's a blast. Crossguard is definitely my favorite. Feels like you're literally mutilating people, because you are. Yeah, Cal is pretty brutal. There is also so much more enemy variety here. They took all the enemies from the first game and doubled them. Now mostly focusing on new droids, troopers, and humanoid enemies compared to monsters and animals, which is exactly what I wanted. You do spend a decent amount of time fighting animals in this game, but it's much more manageable now because the hitboxes have been made much more precise, at least in my experience. It was rare for me to get frustrated or feel like something was unfair. It did happen, but not nearly as much. Cal also just feels better and more precise to control. Hitting enemies feels solid, and the death animations are more brutal than ever. Now, on to the boss fights. The bosses in this game are, for the most part, fun and challenging. The mini-bosses are great, and there's a new long-term side quest in which you take down a ton of bounty hunter bosses, leading up to a really cool scene that I'm not going to spoil, for those who haven't seen it yet. The main story bosses are the real highlight for me, though. I'm a huge fan of these. Dagon is awesome, and you fight him a number of times. The Ninth Sister also makes another appearance. My favorite, almost by far, though, is Ravis. He is one of the few bosses in this game with more than one stage. He has a great build-up, and I found myself pulling out each one of my new tricks in order to defeat him. Not only that, but he's probably one of my favorite characters in this game. There are also companions while you fight now too. Marin and a newcomer named Bode will fight by Cal's side, in a fashion that is similar to God of War. And you can instruct them to attack enemies. I usually dislike fighting with AI companions, but in this case it's actually pretty cool. These are the only 2 characters that will fight by your side, and they both offer different kinds of support. Marin will string up and stun enemies with her magic, while Bode is out here literally drop-kicking people while throwing grenades. The companions are cool for sure, when they work. I ran into some weird problems with Marin, specifically. One especially weird one forced me to reload my game. She just suddenly began T-posing and sliding around frozen while following me. Her character model just completely gave up on animations. It also gave up on fighting, too. She just T-posed in the corner while I took down a group of stormtroopers. Then we came across a scripted fight. Only problem was the fight wouldn't start, because Marin needed to be active in order for it to start. I experienced a few other things like this throughout my playthrough as well, but nothing quite this hilarious. The story here is much broader, and because of this it's a bit messy. Cal is still bringing the fight to the Empire, and he's since separated from the gang. Throughout the story, you reunite with them and some new people. Bode is a newcomer here, and he's not bad, I guess. Throughout most of the game, his main characteristic is that he loves his daughter, and that kind of changes, I guess, but I'll get to that later. Also, Marin is now in a kind of forced romance with Cal. Well, I honestly don't know if I'd call it forced. When it first started happening, my eyes nearly rolled out of my skull, and I don't know if I can say it's that bad, but personally it was not for me, I don't think. Dagon is set up to be the main antagonist here, and Ravis is kind of his sidekick. Overall, it's a good enough set of characters, and I found myself more engaged with it than I was for the first game. But there are problems, specifically with the last quarter of Jedi Survivor. So, one big problem. I'm going to drop a huge spoiler bomb here, so, of course, just beware. Dagon and Ravis aren't really the main antagonists of this game. It's actually a pretty big plot twist that took me by surprise.
Why vote for this? We fought for that together, and you're just gonna hand it to the Empire?
I'm not giving it to the Empire.
You killed Master Cordova.
Cal, you don't have time for this fight. Something terrible is coming for that archive. Listen to your instincts. You know I'm right.
What have you done?
If you want to keep your family safe, you get them out of there. Right now.
What have you done? You can't be.
You're not the only one who survived.
It turns out Bode is a Jedi, and he's working for the Empire, so I guess he's an Inquisitor. So he blows the whistle on everyone and steals the key to Tanalorr, the lost planet that everyone's searching for to escape the Empire. This segment is really cool. There's a moment where Bode nearly kills Cal, and boom, you're suddenly playing a seer, defending the archives from the Empire. This culminates into a boss fight with the bad boy himself, which is one of the coolest moments in Survivor or any of these games. After one of the stronger boss encounters, Vader does kill her, and I do think it was done right. Her death was meaningful, and yeah, I liked her in the end. At this point, I was really feeling the game, and I was super excited to finish. This felt like the climax, and I wanted to beat the shit out of Bode. In other words, I was ready for it to end, but that ending did not come. The game continues for like 3 to 4 more hours after this happens. Whole mechanics are introduced. There are whole levels after this where you sneak into an Inquisition base, then you have to run back to the forest array, getting slammed by waves and waves of never-ending enemies the entire time. It became extremely frustrating. One of my least favorite tropes in video games is the never-ending arena, where you're put into a room and the room is filled with bad guys and they just keep coming in wave after wave after wave. It's especially annoying when it happens more than once. This is not an arena fighter. What I'm describing here happens at least 3 times in the last quarter of the game. Once when you're playing a seer, once when you're in the base, and once when you're in the forest array. And holy shit, it is really frustrating. The last time I literally wanted to stop playing because it feels pointless. These segments could have been trimmed or made much shorter pretty easily from what I gather, and that's what I was thinking the entire time I was playing them. It became extremely laborious for me, and that is a shame because Cal undergoes some neat character building that I found was made less meaningful by all of this mediocre design. It feels like they wanted to pad some of the gameplay segments to make it feel longer, but this game is already really long. While this is happening, Cal begins letting the darkness consume him, and you get a dark force power that you can use in combat. He also becomes more brutal and demanding, more character building than in all of Jedi Fallen Order. Everything he goes through, and everything that he's forced to do, helps shed more light on his character. I liked Cal more in this game. In the end, finally, they reach Tanalorr and you get to fight Bode, and it is very cinematic and cool. Fun times. Bode turns out to be a passable villain here. Everything he did was for his daughter, and he lets this consume him entirely, morphing him into something unrecognizable from the beginning of the game. And Cal is forced to kill him in front of his daughter. Yeah, they decided to move forward and continue their fight against the Empire, with Tanalorr as a place of refuge. It's a hard ending, but I think it's fine. The final fight is really cool, but the fatigue did get to me. As I was saying before, this game overstays its welcome. The combat mechanics and exploration are a good time, but it does get repetitive throughout its ending hours. They really just throw everything at you for like 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours. It's unfortunate because everything else was great. This game is an improvement to Fallen Order in bold font. It sets out to do what his little brother couldn't, and it nearly succeeds.
Oh, come on. 100 years! I won't disappoint you then.
The Star Wars Jedi games were something that I never thought I would play. I honestly thought Fallen Order looked like a bad imitation of Sekiro when it first came out. But after trying them, I must say, I enjoyed myself. I may have started watching Clone Wars because of this game also, and that's a good thing because that show is really cool. I think a sequel should build off the ideas of its predecessors and maybe introduce some new ones. Usually introduce some new ones. This is why I think Jedi Survivor, regardless of my issues with it, is an amazing sequel. Everything lacking from Fallen Order has been polished or innovated upon here. The fans were heard and their feedback was used to craft an even better product, and that's a great thing. I'm happy about that. This game sucked me in, and it actually made me appreciate Star Wars more. I'm excited to see what happens next with the series, if there is another game. Seeing the growth between these two titles is refreshing in comparison to all the pitfalls of modern game development, especially when it comes to sequels and trilogies and so on and so forth. Survivor feels earned. I've seen people referring to it as the best Star Wars game ever made, and I probably can't contest that. Nothing I've played beats it. I hope they continue improving on this formula in the future. I'll be keeping an eye out for it. This is my first YouTube video. In fact, it's my first video, period. I started making this because I wanted to learn video editing. But as I went along, it turned into a full-blown video. And I liked making it, so I think I'm going to keep doing it. If you liked this, I'll be making more stuff. If you don't, we can hug it out in the comments. I don't care. Thank you for watching, whoever you may be. Bird out.